Very. Hello, good evening, welcome back. Sorry for the technical delays. Apparently we couldn't go live with Sarah because we had a phone rotated. Who would have thought? So now we're getting nice and cozy. But yeah, hopefully this should do the trick, and we should have our guest speaker Sara Beth Wald with us here shortly. I do apologize again, and we're so excited to have you here. So thank you so much for your patience.
She's also tracking us now instead of the computer and sees our live now. So hopefully she'll be with us in just a second. For those of you that didn't catch it last time, I told a little bit on my story with trauma last week, and then Megan shared hers the week before, and now we are having our trauma and boundaries coach. And then we're going to come back next week, Sunday, at 6 p.m. and share kind of what we've learned through this whole trauma series. So we're excited about that.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much for being with us. We planned a 4-week trauma series. The trauma is real. This is our 3rd segment, and we're super, super, super excited to learn from Sara Beth Wald. And we will be getting started here shortly. You know, it's not a Saturday or Sunday. There's technical difficulties. It's okay.
Well, the day that all this is sorted out, it's going to be a true miracle.
The day I figure out Streamlabs is when it's going to be like, you know, then I'm live everywhere. It's okay. But then from Streamlabs, how will we get guests? That's a whole other thing.
Whole nother obstacle.
We'll figure it out.
I really wish we could figure out how to create an event.
Right.
You know,
so
that everybody
cool.
can come. We can invite a whole bunch of you all beforehand, and then just kind of have something that opens up it all. So we'll have to figure that out. We have a lot of things to figure out, starting from the bottom, working our way up.
Hello, hello. Thank you for being here. That might be Sarah. I'm not sure. If you're not Sarah, hello. We're waiting on Sarah. Yay! Hi! We're so excited. So let me go ahead. Awesome.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm
Please
sorry.
get it. Oh, don't be sorry.
I have my computer on right now, and you guys aren't playing on my computer, so sorry.
Oh no,
No,
don't be
I'm on
sorry
my
at all. It
phone.
happens to us every week. We're working through it. And a lot of it
Yeah.
too, like we forgot that like if we're horizontal, it won't let other people join in either. So that might have been part of it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I will just talk to you guys on my phone tonight.
Well, thank you so much for being here. We're super excited. Welcome back to Monumental Minds, where every mind matters. I'm Megan Rose.
And I'm Raya Ray, and we're the co-owners and founders of MR2 Connections Incorporated. And tonight we have Traumas and Boundaries coach Sara Beth Wald here, and we're super excited and super honored to have you here.
Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. And I again, I'm sorry we're starting a little bit late, but this is good. I'm so happy to be here, and I'll let you guys just pick my brain. I'm not sure what to expect.
Yeah, no, we're super excited. Thank you so much for being here and willing to share your story. It means the world to us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got from A to B.
Yeah. So, my journey to becoming a boundaries and trauma coach has been kind of a winding road. So yeah, I started out as a trauma survivor in childhood, and then I went to social work school, worked as a social worker for quite a few years, went back, got a master's in journalism. So I've kind of been around the long way, but writing is my first love. Um, and when I started to really decide to dig in and recover from my own trauma, I did what was natural and I decided I was going to write it out. So I sat down and started a blog, and I wrote over a period of 4 years. I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. So I had all of this material and I wasn't publicizing it. I never planned on coaching. But it started to just kind of catch on. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I can actually help people with this whole concept that I created. I didn't really set out to create like a trauma healing framework, but that's kind of what happened. So the way that it's grown has been really, really cool. It's just been one connection at a time with one survivor at a time. And I just combined my writing and my social work, and here I am. So yeah, that's the short version of the story.
And we're so glad that you are a survivor, because so many people in certain instances just don't make it through, something traumatic. So truly just a blessing and miracle. And we're so happy that you're here to share your testimony and your journey. It does help save so many people. When I really didn't have anyone to go to in those terms, I went for, people's stories and journeys for motivation. Like, they made it, I can make it. And it's just, there's so much power in that. I'm getting a little oozy. I'm sorry. But we're so glad you're here. So tell us a little bit, like, mental health is it's an important thing and a key factor in healing from trauma. So, like, how did that come into play? Because you mentioned it was a childhood trauma. So when did it first click that, hey, I can make it through, or what were some of the tools? Or tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, for sure. So my trauma journey, it's tricky because for a long time I didn't realize that that I had experienced trauma myself. It's so interesting how we go into adulthood and life, and what's normal to us, it takes a long time for us to realize, like, oh wait, that's not everybody else's normal. So I was a social worker. I was in college. I was doing all the things, and I really didn't decide I need to create a different life until I became a mom, and I wanted to give my child something different than what I had. And that's when it kind of clicked. So I call it my past life. And I focused on career and education for a long time. So I didn't have my first child till I was 30. So really it was that 31 when I hit that mark, I just had this monumental shift in my mind. And but I grew up in a family that was very publicly perfect and very privately shattered. So what went on in our private lives at home was very different than the family that people saw out in public. My parents were business owners in the community and really involved in a lot of different community things. And so again, I grew up kind of feeling like this was sort of a privileged life, but my dad was an alcoholic and my mom had, now I realize, depression and all kinds of different issues going on. And it was just a really, really toxic way to grow up. And I married really young with somebody else who was a trauma survivor, and it did not go well. It wasn't a very healthy relationship. We share a child, so and I honor that relationship, and I honor my son's relationship with him, with his dad. So I don't talk a whole lot about that, but it was not a good situation for me to be in, and I wanted something different for my child. So that's when it clicked. It was, for me, it was a moment. It was just, I can't live like this anymore. My kid needs something different. And everything kind of fell apart, but it was all for good. It didn't feel good at the time. Divorce and leaving behind everything that you own. I mean, I moved across the state or the country with my child, and started over from scratch. And it didn't feel great at the time, but in hindsight, it was a really beautiful journey that I needed to take in order to heal. So that's a summary.
It's crazy, like, how you've actually gotten through trauma survivors yourself and are now able to help trauma survivors. That's so crazy. So how, like, was there a time in between you going through your trauma and then being able to finally be able to help others with theirs? Like, what kind of healing did you have to do in the middle before you could actually take on helping others with their trauma?
Yes, for sure. So I spent most of my 30s in therapy. I walked into a therapist's office and I said, I do not know how I screwed up my life, but I did, and I need to figure it out and do something different. And that began a 9-year intensive of therapy and really just a rebuilding of my life. In that time, I got remarried. I had another child. Have really just started from scratch. So I think, and that's a great point and a great question, because it's really important for people to realize that you don't just go from, I say it was instantaneous. It was the awareness was instant. It was like, this is not okay. The healing was not instant. That was a good 9-10 years of intense therapy. I'm a huge believer in therapy. I still have therapy. It's just a great way to process and get an objective. It doesn't matter if you're a helper yourself. When it's your life, you need somebody else to give you another perspective on things. So yeah, and now I'm in my 40s, and I did write that blog, and that was a 4-year process. I started in 2018, and that's really when I went through that big transformation, was those 4 years of writing. So yeah.
So you have a blog. How can we see this blog?
Yeah. I do have a blog. And as a writer, I'm kind of all over the place online, but my trauma blog is called Redefining Love. And what I did when I sat down was to start writing, I thought, I don't like this definition of love. I'm bumping up against this definition of love. I feel like I'm not loving right. Maybe I don't know how to love. And so I started to truly come up with my own definition of love, that allowed me to not always feel warm and fuzzy. When it's your parents, when it's a co-parent, you have a child together, you don't want to hate them. You still want to love them. You just don't want to have to put up with all the toxic drama that goes along with it. So I created this new definition of love. And I kind of just wrote my way through it, and it allows for those big feelings, and the conflict, and it allows you to love people from a distance if you need to, which is often the case in abusive situations. And I couldn't find that. when I started. Megan had mentioned at the beginning that she felt really alone, and for sure I did. And I am a researcher by nature, the whole journalist thing. And I thought, surely I can find some resources online. And I couldn't find anything that allowed me to love these people from a distance and set some healthy boundaries. So I created it myself and I wrote it. So if people want to go there, they can go to redefine-love.com. And it's more than a blog now. There's still my blog on there. I add to it every week, but it's just the whole concept of redefining love now is on there, but that did not happen overnight. That's been a 4-year process.
Yeah, I can only imagine. That's amazing. That's so cool. So as a writer, obviously that was a really big tool in your healing process and in your journey with healing from those traumas. Can you tell us, like, what are some other tools that you utilized during that process? Because you said resources were hard to find. So how were you able to work through that and, get to the point where you were able to have the blog?
Yeah. So, man, I mean, as far as like therapy modalities, I've tried everything. I love EMDR, but in my coaching practice, I really talk a lot about mindfulness. I am very fascinated with the idea of your wounded self. So I do a lot of self-talk to that wounded self, and I find the different selves, because our trauma gets stuck. So when our brain is trying to process trauma, it gets stuck in wherever we were when it happened. So let's say you were a child and there was some sort of traumatic event, whether it was an abuse event or sometimes it's like my trauma was more compound trauma, it was just sort of a day. I was always on eggshells. I was always day in, day out in this dysregulated state of fight or flight, and your brain gets stuck there. So I actually have this picture of myself. Let's see, little Sarah, and I keep her right there. And I try to be the mom that she always needed, even the dad that she always needed, the friend that she always needed. So I do a lot of work with the wounded self, so that we can comfort that, turn off that trauma brain, and move beyond that. Which of course was what I learned throughout all my therapy, and also through my experience as a social worker and different things, lots of research. But yeah, I love The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but if you haven't, it's a pretty heavy book. I had to actually listen to it because it's a lot of information, but it talks a lot about your trauma brain, and how to move beyond those states of dysregulation into a place of more regulation. So yeah, there's just so many different techniques that you can use, but meditation is huge.
Yeah, I love meditation. It takes me a couple minutes at a time with the ADHD, but that's where the mindfulness comes into play, because I'm a big, big believer in mindfulness, and the one mindness training is how I've always consistently been able to bring myself back into the meditative states, which has been incredibly helpful. I love that you mentioned like finding your wounded self. So can you explain that? Like, how would we go about finding that? So we would have several wounded selves in a sense, right? So it would be each traumatic event, or
Yeah, definitely. I like to do what I call a personal inventory, and because I'm a writer, I have a lot of writing ideas, but you could, in theory, just do it through meditation or thinking about all of the different stages. And as you get more comfortable in identifying all of those different places where you are traumatized or what's being triggered in that moment, so that takes that mindfulness and that intentional okay, is this me? Is this my trauma being triggered? Or is this a person that is maybe in their own trauma state? And trying to differentiate between what's mine to carry and what somebody else's to carry. Which is a discussion about boundaries, which is a little bit, it's all connected. But as far as identifying those different wounded selves, I strongly encourage writing it out and sitting down and thinking, okay, these are the exact pictures that I can have in my brain, or make a vision board. I'm a big believer in that too.
I love vision boards. She got me like hooked on vision boards.
Yeah. And so you can actually create like a mindfulness vision board where you find pictures of yourself at each stage where you were triggered, or where you're traumatized. And then you can talk to each one of those. And it sounds a little crazy. Like, yes, I am totally encouraging you to talk to yourself. But so if you're triggered by somebody who is disrespecting you, and maybe in your 20s you had a really toxic friendship that kind of left you traumatized, and this person is actually triggering that trauma response from that stage. So you will have a picture of that. You can sit down, you can be the friend that that person needed at that time, so that you can differentiate between this is what's happening now versus this is what happened then, and these are not the same. Your brain doesn't realize that. Your brain is going to treat it like it's the same, so you're reliving that same moment. So if you can talk to that part of your brain, and calm it down and be the friend that you needed in that moment, then it can get you into a more regulated space so that you can handle this new relationship with a little more objectivity, and you're not handling it from that triggered state.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've never tried that before. That I'm definitely going to incorporate, and I'm going to do that this week. I think it's super important. I talk to myself all the time, and I have no shame in admitting it. And it's really just kind of a way for me to filter through, because I have 50,000 tabs open at once in my mind, and it kind of filters through the thoughts, and I'm able to collect and kind of self-analyze. It helps me in so many ways. So I love that. And so oftentimes we're not nice to ourselves when we talk, and so many times we just kind of beat ourselves down with the internal verbiage that we're beating ourselves. So that's super important to be that friend, because we don't remember to treat ourselves as nice as we would treat our best friend. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. And there's another thing that, when I kind of touched on the boundaries, but another thing that I love to teach is figuring out, I call it the fence line. And so basically, if you were going to build a fence around your house, you would first establish where that fence line is, because we tend to either, if we're as trauma survivors, we either hold everything way too close and we don't let anybody in. Which, if you imagine it as a fence, you've built your fence so close to your house that you have no margin, you have no room to let any relationships into your life, which was definitely kind of how I was. Or the other extreme is you build your fence way too far out, and you have everyone all up in your business, and you have no space, everybody is enmeshed and all in your energy field, and you're also probably crossing boundaries for other people too. So they're feeling like maybe you're not a safe person because you've put your fence so far out there that you kind of are in their space. So it's really important to figure out exactly what space you need to hold, and it's going to be different for everybody, and it might be different depending on the relationship. I'm going to let my husband in closer than I'm going to let, a coworker, or that kind of thing. So you have to, in each relationship, think, okay, where is a safe space for my fence? And then once you can do that, you can set those boundaries in a more comfortable way. So you can say, I get it. This is you. You can let them carry their own stuff. But I don't think this is a safe person for me to let in. And so you can very comfortably figure out where you want to draw that line with each individual person. So that's another way that I recommend that people work with boundaries and figure out where to actually set those boundaries.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, like, a question I'm dying to know, because even when we started on our trauma series and we both shared our own personal stories, I think it was hard to take. It was very, I don't know, like emotionally draining. So how do you hear about people's traumas, you know, and coach them through that without kind of taking that home yourself, you know, or just being weighed down by it?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was a young social worker, I was terrible at it. And I think a huge part of it was I hadn't done the work myself. Because, so if we imagine that fence line, I basically just took the fence down and let all of it come in, and I had no I carried all of it for everyone, and I didn't have any idea of like, well, okay, this is not mine to carry. And so what I've been able to do now is I can hear the stories and I can feel empathy, but there's a huge difference between empathy versus just taking it on yourself. So now I could hear your stories and I could feel deep compassion and empathy for you. But I realize that it's not your stories are not mine to carry. Mine is not yours to carry. So I offer what I can, and whatever that is within my skill set and my abilities, and then I let the rest go. And I'm comfortable passing that responsibility back to the other person and recognizing that their story, ultimately, they're the only ones that are going to be able to resolve this for themselves. But that's been a journey too. That did not happen overnight for me either.
What were some tools that you used to kind of help separate? Because I think a lot of times we get so invested ourselves, and like for me personally, I'm like, oh, what can I do that? Well, it's not really my problem to fix, or you know, there's only so much I can do. All I can do is listen. So, what are some tools that you use to separate and not really take that on?
Yeah, and sorry, you were cutting out a little, so hopefully I'm not cutting out too. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not holding this weird. Oh, I don't know if I'm cutting out.
Oh, I'm sorry, a little bit, but you're okay. You're still with us.
Okay,
It was
good,
cutting out
good.
earlier.
Okay. Okay. So what did I do to figure that out? I think, and I mean, I say it a lot, and I probably say it so much it drives my clients crazy, but you've got to do the work. And when I start to take it on, I just have become really intentional and think, okay, what about their story is triggering my trauma response? Because it's not like your trauma just shuts off and then you're fixed. I will always have my own triggers too. So it's really just an awareness of thinking, okay, I'm feeling really dysregulated right now, and I feel like I'm taking this on, and maybe I'm laying awake at night. So it's an opportunity, and I do see it as an opportunity to dig deeper within myself and figure out what about this person's story is triggering for me. And then I also make sure, another check that I do on myself, it's really just about being mindful and intentional about all of the relationships. I've turned down clients because I didn't feel like I had the experience. For example, I've just recently started, I found somebody who works just with sexual assault or childhood sexual abuse, because I don't, thank God, have that in my list of traumas. And it's such a different category that I need to recognize my own limits. And so I tend to refer that on, especially if they're just starting that trauma journey, because I know my own limits and abilities, and I want to make sure they get the help that they need. So sometimes if I start to feel overwhelmed or I'm taking it on, I will remind myself or do kind of an inventory of myself and think, all right, well, is this within your wheelhouse? Is this within your skill set? If the answer is yes, and I'm still triggered, then it's probably triggering my own trauma. So I've just become really, really intentional about what's mine to carry and what isn't someone else's. And it's kind of just come with practice. Practice in mindfulness and thinking about my own reactions to things.
Yeah, and that's so important. And really everything we do is making sure that the intention behind it is in line with what's really going to serve us, especially in protecting our energy and even with setting boundaries in our life and being intentional and what's going to serve us and what's not and what we need to separate from. I know that was really hard for me. It's hard for so many people, but you know, you have to. There's times where there's people you love them to death, but all you can do is pray and walk away because it's toxic. Boundaries are super important, and I just love that you had mentioned, being intentional in that.
So I must know, what's your definition of trauma? Because we've been going back and forth. We were trying to think when we were coming up with our trauma series is like, what is trauma? Because there's so many events that have happened in somebody's life, and I feel like a lot of times too, people put their trauma on a scale, and if it's not as traumatic as maybe somebody else's, we dumb down our own traumas. So, like, what is your definition of it?
Right. Yes. And such a good question, because for sure, like, it's just kind of like for me, I have a friend who has war trauma. Well, I have no war trauma. And so then it's like, well, on the scale, my trauma is not as significant as that trauma. But what I've learned about trauma is that trauma is anything that gets your brain stuck in that spot and stuck in that fight or flight, and fight, flight, or freeze. And it's going to be different for everybody. Two people can be in the same car accident, and one person walks away and they're, they might be a little sore, but they're okay. The other person has nightmares and they have to go to therapy, and it really is just the way that their individual brain has responded to that event. So trauma can be anything. Anything that your brain gets stuck on in that fight or flight mode. And then that part of your brain that is stuck does not mature beyond that. So until you can get it unstuck and start the wheels kind of turning again, you are going to be stuck and reliving that, whether consciously in, like, you have nightmares and flashbacks and you're very aware of it, or it might be subconscious and it's just affecting your relationships because you're snapping at everybody and you're just unable to have a positive romantic relationship. I mean, there's so many different ways that trauma manifests, but yeah, for me, trauma is any time that somebody's brain gets stuck there. And it can, any kind of inciting event, a dog bite, it could be different for anybody. So putting it on a scale, it's such a dangerous thing because we're all different. We're all wired completely differently. So what traumatizes me might be different than what traumatizes you.
And we actually talked a little bit about this, and I think we're going to do a segment of it, because comparison is it's the worst thing you can do in anything, whether it's something that you're creating or something that you're trying to accomplish, whether it's trauma or pain. Comparing, it invalidates what you're going through. There's just so much toxicity that breeds from it, and there's so much negative energy that breeds from it, and it's really realizing that and being aware that what you experience is just as valid as what anybody else did. And the feelings, the emotions that it triggers are just as real as anything else. Because like you said, that car accident, that was a perfect analogy, really, because it's a perspective, right? So everybody experiences it differently. But like, I mean, we can have different things that still give us that gut-wrenching feeling that make our body go numb, those triggers.
I mean, that's in your story, a car accident. So it's actually very, I'm sure you can relate that different people in that car had, maybe different trauma from that situation. Absolutely. I guess a question I have, though, and it's from kind of the stories that we've shared, our personal stories kind of with trauma, and we've both lost due to suicide. And there's some things I wonder, like, as far as, well, I'm kind of triggered by orange electrical cords still. And then I get stuck. So, like, is there ever getting over that? Like, would you tell somebody that maybe I won't struggle with that for the rest of my life, that triggering moment, or does that always kind of stay around? You just maybe learn to deal with it better. I don't know.
Again, I think that that's personal for each person. I do, and there's a lot of research out there that is starting to we're just at the tip of the iceberg of understanding how to turn off some of that stuff. But, and I don't know if you two have experience with, I've done EMDR, which I keep talking about, and I don't do it myself. That's definitely a therapist role. But there are ways that they are learning that can actually reprogram some of that stuff. But I'm not going to say it's going to work for everybody. It's just the science is too new. But there are ways to cope with it in a healthy way. So one of the things that is kind of weird, but triggering for me is the color pink, which has to do with my childhood and being the only girl and some issues in my own family. But I have had EMDR about pink, the color pink, and it's incredible. But I don't know if you're probably never going to see me in a pink sweater, like, but at least I don't get just, if I'm in a pink room, I don't get just almost where I can't concentrate. So it does become more manageable. And there are a number of different techniques that you can use to make them more manageable. But hypnotherapy is another one that I have not tried that I really want to try.
Actually done hypnotherapy.
Oh, did it work?
Yeah, so I was very young. There's actually something that my mom got into. She was doing it for weight loss. My sister had picked up a smoking habit, so she was doing it to quit smoking. And then I was doing it. So I would use food for comfort, and so I was emotionally abusing food. And so they did it, and it did help. It was kind of crazy, but I was so young, I really didn't grasp the power of what it was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's something that I would actually be really interested in even trying again. It
Yeah.
is like programming the mind.
Yeah, it really is. And if you think about the mind like a computer, one of the things that I do that I can practice with my clients is identifying. For me, I can almost feel like I keep touching the back of my head when I think about trauma, because for me, that's where my trauma lives. And if you really sit down and you think about, okay, where in my body, where in my head am I feeling these emotions, then you can actually start to consciously visit that place. Like if I saw pink, or if you saw an electrical cord, just having that awareness that, okay, this is going to trigger me, and sort of speaking to that. It's almost like speaking to that wounded self again. I mean, like, it's okay, and reassuring and very specifically targeting into wherever you feel it. And I always touch the back of my head, and I think it's different for everyone. but speaking into those different parts of your body that react. Some people carry it in their shoulders and their neck. Some people, their stomach tightens, and just actively thinking about,
Oh, my
what
stomach
area,
is...
and really just being conscious of talking through that, being like, okay, I'm triggered right now. It's all right, and just that awareness seems to really help a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Awareness is just really everything, and 'cause I have to do it so often. Like if there's like a loud crash or yelling, my whole body goes numb, and I'm just gut sick. Like I'm just wrenched, and I get goosebumps and tingly. I'm like, I just have to. Okay, I'm not. This has nothing to do with me. Not my drama, not my monkey, not my zoo. And I take a few deep breaths in and kind of meditate for a few seconds to get myself out of that state that I get triggered into.
Yep. And breathing is huge. I mean, I can't say enough about how good it is to just take a couple of deep breaths, and that will actually reset that trauma response too, because oftentimes we don't even realize it. We're holding all of that breath in, and if we just do a couple deep breaths, that can do wonders for you too. But getting back to your question about whether or not it'll ever go away, I wish I could promise, like, yes, here's the quick fix, but anybody who tells you that is probably giving you a runaround, because just so different for everyone. Does it ever happen? Has anyone ever been able to just turn it off? Probably, yeah. But it's so different for everyone.
Yeah, that's why we really love this platform and love this show, and because it's so important to get those different vantage points, because everybody experiences it differently and everybody heals differently. There's a different process. There's no right or wrong way. I mean, there's things that will serve you and things that won't, but everybody has their own process. And thank you so much for being here and sharing all that. It's just so important, and I just love it. I'm definitely going to incorporate. I'm going to find my wounded children. I've got a lot of them. I'm going to find them this week. It's so important, because, like I said before, so oftentimes we forget to kind of nurture ourselves through the process of healing, and it's not an overnight thing. It never will be. And that's the first thing I tell people. I'm like, this isn't going to just go away. It's always going to hurt. There's always going to be emotion behind it, but you will be able to, like, kind of, it's like building a muscle, right? You get strong against it, and you like build up a callus almost, and you're able to cope and manage and navigate through those emotions. So yeah, I'm just so excited. Thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to incorporate that into...
Yeah, we're coming back next week Sunday and hoping to maybe that's what we'll do. We'll find our wounded children and share them next week, because we're wrapping up the trauma series. So maybe that'll be a good one to go in for next Sunday at 6 to finish up the trauma series. But we're just so glad that you were able to be here and to talk with us. And if there's any sort of links or ways people can get to your coaching, we would love to share them for you. So if you want to send us any links into either one of our personal or MR2's Facebook site, as far as how people can reach out to you and hopefully...
Sorry, the audio is off, so I can't tell if it's my turn to talk or not, but
You're a little bit sloppy, but we got you.
Okay. Yeah, I will definitely send you something, and apologize, I have weird audio happening right now, but I will send those to you. I'm so happy to be here and share with you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much again for being here. Thank you all for being here again for our 13th episode of Monumental Minds. Again, this is Sara Beth Wald, and we will be sharing all of her links on our Facebook pages and Instagram as well. We'll post them up. So thank you again. We're going to be checking out her podcast. We're so excited, and tune in next week Next week we will be going on Sunday because it's my nephew's birthday. He's turning 1 on Saturday, so we will be next Sunday at 6 p.m. Central instead. And we will talk to you about how we did with the new things that we're going to be incorporating this week that we learned. So thank you so much again. And until next time, keep those good vibes spreading.
Bye, guys.